Hello and welcome to Classical Stuff You Should Know, a podcast about books and classical education and Jane Austen. My name is Thomas Magby. I am joined as always by Mr. Graeme Donaldson.
Hello.
And Mr. AJ Hannenberg.
That's this guy right here.
And I already said we're talking about Jane Austen, so this is going to be Pride and Prejudice Part 2, Part 3.
Have we done a Pride and Prejudice episode?
I think we did. I think
Really?
we've done one before, yeah. And that's the only book that she wrote,
That's
right?
the only one
so,
she
yeah.
wrote.
So it's the only one that we can talk about. Really excited to dive back in. Take it away, Graeme Donaldson.
No, today we are going to be talking about Emma.
What?
So Emma, novel by Jane Austen, and sort of part of a bigger thing. I haven't read everything Jane Austen's written, but I've read quite a bit. And this is sort of part of my realization that I think Jane Austen is very important. Not only is she just but she's like really fun to read.
Yeah.
But I feel like in terms of
Isn't this like a Homer's pretty good? Like what?
no, I get maybe so. But,
Yeah.
Okay, maybe this is my own ignorance because when I was a kid growing up, in my mind, Jane Austen was like the thing your older sister liked.
Oh.
They would watch the 5-hour BBC things, and they were just about like girls falling in love. Like that was the image I had in my mind. Is that it's just
smooching.
It's just smooching.
Yep.
It's just like 19th century romantic comedies, and that was about it.
Yep.
And it was just cleverly done and beautiful dresses and gardens and romance, and that was all there was to it.
Yeah.
But the more that I've read Jane Austen, I'm sort of developing a little bit of a thesis in my mind of why I think Jane Austen is like just sort of important for everybody to read, because it paints a picture of like psychologically healthy people.
Wow.
So maybe we'll sort of get to this towards the end of the episode. But that's kind of the thesis. My thesis is, so like if you have, health in a body, right? Like there's 1,000 ways that a body can go sick. There are 1,000 ways that a body can go wrong. You got too much blood, you got not enough blood. You got, too much bile, not enough bile, or whatever. There's all these different ways that a body can go unhealthy. But there is a small sort of band upon which a body is working the way it's supposed to be, and you would call it healthy. And I think definitely this is not just a Graeme theory. This Plato talks about this. This is true also of the soul, that there's 1,000 different ways for the soul to go wrong, but there really is kind of just like a narrow band upon which the soul you would consider healthy and happy. And so much of Jane Austen's work is talking about people who are on the road to unhappiness without maybe even realizing it and course correcting and going to happiness. And so that's why I think like she's very important to read, and also just sort of really interesting that she comes at the beginning of the 19th century, when that century, the 19th century, is the century of psychoanalysis and the century of trying to map all of the conditions of the soul, or trying to give framework and language to, narcissism and whatever the terms are, right? Like the Freud's coming in and he's trying to give these categories to different kinds of soul maladies. And the reason I've been thinking of Austen in this way is because I've been teaching her in this class this year, and I've paired her with a book that comes towards the end or the latter half of the 19th century. I paired it with Crime and Punishment, which is a real tone shift between the two of them. But the more that we've been comparing them together in class, the more I realize like Dostoevsky talks about the soul, the sick soul, the paranoid narcissist Raskolnikov, and all of Jane Austen's characters are these people that have similar kind of tendencies, albeit very small and very like undeveloped problems. But if not course corrected, are sort of on the road to unhappiness, and a lot of the characters sort of realize that partway through the book. So that's why I think Jane Austen actually ends up is not just like fluffy romantic comedies, but is really sort of observant and really understands the human soul very well and how it can go wrong and go well. So we're going to be talking about Emma today. And the book starts off with kind of like a tip to be reading the book kind of that way. So Emma is a wealthy, beautiful woman, and she's young, 21, and she lives in this little small town where she is pretty much the like preeminent girl in town. And she's rich, but she's not like the high aristocrat of town. There's another family called the Knightleys who are Mr. Knightley. He owns the estate that employs all the farmers, and Mr. Knightley clearly lives in the big house, the like Downton Abbey house, right? And he is very much the responsible man who is the big aristocrat. And the Emma Woodhouse is from a smaller aristocratic family that doesn't own land and doesn't have servants and this kind of stuff, but still lives in this beautiful house. Anyway, she is rich. She was beautiful. And it starts off with this. Emma Woodhouse, handsome, clever, and rich, with a comfortable home and happy disposition, seemed to unite some of the best blessings of existence, and had lived nearly 21 years in the world with very little to distress or vex her.
Wow.
So she has had a life where things have always gone right for her. Now, that's not entirely true. She's lost her mom. Her mother has died. But Emma has borne it well. But on that very first couple of paragraphs, Jane Austen points this out about Emma. The real evils, indeed, of Emma's situation were the power of having rather too much her own way and a disposition to think a little too well of herself. These were the disadvantages which threatened to alloy her many enjoyments. The danger, however, was at present so unperceived that they did not by any means rank as misfortunes with her. So Emma's sins, insofar as what they are so like sort of small and baby and undeveloped that if you bumped into her and met her, you wouldn't be like, oh gosh, that woman, like she is conceited. No, they're so small and undetectable that you wouldn't rank them as misfortunes, but if left sort of unchecked, they could grow and they could develop into something really bad. Anyway, so we're going to sort of briefly chart the story in its broad strokes, and AJ can help fill in the blanks because he's recently read it too. And then I kind of want to talk a little bit about just sort of like our last episode with the dude in the well.
Yep.
Emma kind of has a couple of moments where herself is revealed to herself.
Did y'all read this as a part of Veritas?
We do now. It's part of the 12th grade class, yeah.
Oh, got it.
The teachers read it as like professional development. They wanted us to start reading some of the books of Western canon, which I'm behind.
That's
great idea. Yep. And so you could select which one you wanted. So I selected
Emma was the one. That's cool.
So Emma, it starts off, has had a great success in her life in that she has essentially gotten her governess, who ended up being sort of like her surrogate mother, who was a couple of years older than her, and who sort of helped raise her. She found a match for her, and they got married. And now Miss Taylor is gone and married, and Emma feels very proud of the fact that she was able to basically get this match together. We don't see how it happened. We don't know how it happened, but we know that Emma was like, "Hey, Miss Taylor, have you ever thought about Mr. Weston? Have you ever thought about marrying Mr. Weston? Or Mr. Weston, look at Miss Taylor. Doesn't she look beautiful tonight?" And Mr. Weston's like, "By gosh, she is."
Good heavens, I never noticed before.
Yes, and so Emma is fresh off the success of having gotten Miss Taylor and Mr. Weston married, much to her father, her very dopey. He's not dopey. How would you describe Mr. Woodhouse?
He's a hypochondriac. Mm-hmm.
He's glorious.
He's great. He doesn't like to go outside. Mm-hmm. He doesn't like it when there's a chill. He eats plain oatmeal.
Yeah.
He eats porridge.
Gruel, he calls it.
Gruel, and he's like, it's great for the Constitution. I don't know what you guys are eating all this other stuff. You're going to get unhealthy. And he doesn't he's not going to go outside if it's windy, if it's sunny, if it's cold, if it's he's just so obsessed with good health.
Yeah.
And then at one point, Woodhouse wants to go to a party, and he's like, absolutely not. You cannot go to seriously think going to a party is a good idea. You will get a chill riding to and from. He's that kind of guy.
But there's a fireplace at the party.
Yeah, exactly. He thinks she will be too cold, and she's like, "There's a fireplace at the party." He's like, "That may be, but you'll have to go in between." And she's like, "Yes, but there's a carriage to take us in between, so it'll be so fast. I will barely feel the chill."
There's a tiny little subplot where people are eating apples, and he's just like, I can't fathom how people can eat such unhealthy things such as apples.
Yeah,
you have to boil them until they're healthy or something.
Yeah, he's got all these ideas about his health, and he doesn't like the idea of Emma getting married. He doesn't like the idea of Emma leaving the house. He needs to be slowly convinced of things such that they seem like they're his idea. So if you want him to change his ways, it's got to be like, "Hey, I think a holiday at the sea might be fun." And he's like, "Absolutely not. The sea would be terrible. We'd all be dead within a week." And then they'd be like, but this other doctor says it's like really good for this particular, like, over time they just sort of wear him down. Yeah.
And Emma is very good at this, and she sort of learned that she can slowly maneuver her father to the conclusions where the father thinks he himself has thought of them. So Emma's very good at this. So this is part of her character.
And it's played by the guy that...
Played by?
Well, I like in the show.
Oh.
In the newer movie.
I haven't seen the new movie.
You haven't seen the new movie?
No.
Okay, never mind then.
Okay. Anyway, and then Mr. Knightley, who is a friend of the family, he is also loves Mr. Woodhouse, and he's also very good at sort of appeasing the old man's sort of foibles. Anyway, Emma has recently gotten her old not a chambermaid, what's it called? A governess to be married. And so now Emma thinks that she's very good at this. And in fact, she took great delight in bringing people together and making them happy. She has befriended a woman in town who is a couple years younger than her and who has no family and lives in a boarding house. And let's just say Harriet is not the brain surgeon of the community.
She's beautiful and simple.
She is beautiful and simple, and she is...
But well-meaning.
Well-meaning.
Yep.
And Harriet will basically agree with the last person who said something emphatically. And Harriet's like, well, yes. So
of course, it can be no other.
So Harriet is beautiful, but she is very simple anyway, but she is starstruck with Emma because Emma is this big, wealthy, aristocratic lady.
Emma's the it girl of town.
Emma's the it girl of town, and Harriet is living in this boarding house. She's about to graduate from school, and if she doesn't get married and doesn't have any prospects, she's going to be like a spinster in this boarding house forever. And Harriet is not happy about this. Emma thinks Harriet is too beautiful for this to befall her, and Emma decides that she is going to take up the charge of finding someone to marry Harriet. Harriet has spent a summer with Mr. Martin, who was a simple farmer with big boots. And he's like a 23-year-old farming guy, and he's not sophisticated, and he's just a farmer. But he really loves Harriet.
And he works hard.
He works hard.
Manages his farm well.
And his farm is on the land of Mr. Knightley, so Mr. Knightley knows him quite well. And Mr. Knightley, who is very rational and very well-meaning and very kind, has said that Mr. Martin is actually a really great guy, even though he's really young, and I don't know why he wants to get married so young. And I don't know why he wants to marry somebody so sort of not a farm wife like Harriet. She can't do anything. She's just pretty. But
I think there you have it.
What? Exactly.
Yeah. Right.
So Mr. Martin wants to marry her, and Mr. Knightley's like, I don't really approve of it, but if he wants to do it, that's fine. And Emma's like, no. Harriet is not marrying Mr. Martin. Harriet is...
But he's a good guy.
Harriet is so above Mr. Martin.
On the social ladder.
On the social
cannot
ladder.
believe that he would deign to try to marry Harriet.
Mr. Martin would be like, so, do you like cows? Right? Like, what are you going to talk about with a farmer? No. Yeah. Harriet is destined for greatness because she's also my friend and she's so beautiful. There's this great scene where Mr. Knightley and Emma have this argument where... where it turns out that Emma has actually... Mr. Martin proposes, and Harriet, who does not know how to make a decision for herself, comes to Emma and says, what do I do? What do I do? And Emma's like, well, I'm not going to tell you what to do. But if you marry Mr. Martin, it's a shame we won't be able to be friends anymore, because obviously he's a farmer, and he can't come to my fancy house as a farmer. That's just weird. And you can't come to all the parties that I go to. And then she has other reason to suspect that there's somebody else that likes Harriet. And basically, she doesn't tell Harriet what to do, but she tells Harriet what to do.
Yeah.
And Harriet rejects poor Mr. Martin.
And her protest is pretty much like, yeah, but he's poor.
Yeah, he's a farmer. Mr. Knightley finds out about this and is very upset with Emma and thinks that she is meddling.
Because Mr. Martin is great.
Mr. Martin is great.
He works hard. He manages his farm. He's got virtues up and down.
Yep.
Like he's a great. Mr. Martin is classy and awesome.
Yep. Even though he's not sophisticated, he reads. He lent Harriet a book, and they kind of flirted over the book.
Yeah, he's not a dummy. He just doesn't have a whole lot of money.
Exactly. And Mr. Knightley says that Harriet should have married Mr. Martin. In fact, Mr. Martin, for whatever reason, wants to marry Harriet, even though he could do better than Harriet, but he loved her, and so he should marry her. And Emma says, but Harriet is too beautiful. She can marry so much higher above her. And they argue that Harriet should be marrying, she can marry this other man.
Because
named-
Knightley also knows that Harriet doesn't really have anything to,
fall back on.
to like promote her to a higher marriage, right? She doesn't have a great family. She doesn't have a big fortune. She's just pretty.
And Emma says, being just pretty is a massive card to play in the marketplace of love, Knightley. And Knightley's like, no, men consider all these other things. And Emma's like, yeah, when men are philosophical about love, then I'll believe you. But trust me, men will marry a pretty face. And Harriet's got a great card to play, and she will be able to marry up.
The funny thing is that she feels like Mr. Martin is so much below her. He reads, and Emma has all these books she intends to read.
Yeah, but she never reads.
But doesn't actually read them.
Although there's one where she's shamed by her rival, where she doesn't know how to play piano as well as her and doesn't read as well as her, that she like tries to read for an afternoon. It's like, oh, it's so boring.
But she does practice the piano really hard for like 2 hours.
For 2 hours, yes. Anyway, Knightley and Emma kind of argue about this because Emma is convinced that the local new vicar in town, Mr. Elton, is in love with Harriet. And the reason for this is Mr. Elton is always hanging around when Emma and Harriet are there. And Emma's like, this is happening. This is going to happen.
What did you say? Well, Emma and
Yes,
Harriet?
correct.
Okay, great.
Now, and she's like, this is going to happen. And so Emma says that she's going to paint a picture of Harriet. And Mr. Elton is going to come observe. And Mr. Elton's there is like, oh, Emma, this is the most amazing portrait I've ever seen.
Look at the beauty, look at the figure, the lines.
Captured her face. And Emma's like, this guy's got it bad for Harriet.
Yeah.
And he's like
he gushes over a painting and
he's gushing over it. There's this other little subplot that has to do, we're not going to do the entire book, that has to do with like, they have this little scrapbook of poems and Mr. Elton submits a poem and it seemingly is about Harriet, although it talks about the keenness of mind. And Emma's like, that can't be about Harriet. But a man in love can say all sorts of things.
All sorts of stuff.
And anyway, so Emma is convinced, and so she steers Harriet away from marrying Mr. Martin because she's pretty convinced that Mr. Elton will marry Harriet and tells Mr. Knightley so. And Knightley's like, there ain't no way. Mr. Elton will never marry down. And Emma's like, Harriet's gorgeous. And Mr.
Sometimes hot people are great.
Sometimes hot people are great. And Mr. Knightley's like, trust me, Mr. Elton will always try to marry up. And Emma's like, there's no way. Anyway, long story short, it's Christmas time. Yeah. They're coming home from the party that AJ made reference to that Mr. Woodhouse didn't want to go to because there was a little bit of snow on the ground. And he's like lamenting that it's like the end of the world, like apocalyptic snow.
We will never get out of the house.
And it's like a dusting on the ground. There's this hilarious scene where they're all like wringing their hands and wondering if they'll ever get the horses out. And meanwhile, Mr. Knightley goes out and gets all the carriages. He's like, all right, let's go. And then Mr. Knightley takes Mr. Woodhouse home to calm him down in the carriage. And Emma is left alone in the carriage with Mr. Elton. Uh-oh. And Mr. Elton has a delightfully cringy scene where he professes his deep and dying love. Oh, Harriet couldn't make it to the party because she was sick. He professes his deep, undying love for Emma. And Emma's like, say what? No. What you talking about?
You love Harriet.
You love Harriet. He's like, Miss Smith, Harriet. Who can think of Miss Smith when Miss Woodhouse is around? Says Mr. Elton, and Emma's like, oh dear. And this did not go well.
She totally misread the painting thing. Yeah. Like he even took the painting and was like, I'm going to go like get this. Was it like in a gallery or something? He was going to take it and get it framed. And he like, it's like, I have such a precious cargo. Well, it was because Emma painted it, not because it wasn't the Harriet. Subject. Right. Yeah. And so Emma like misread it so hard. And the funny thing is you get hints of this as a reader.
Oh yeah.
Like as he's standing there being like, look at the sure lines and they're like, you've captured her face perfectly. I'm like, oh no. Yeah. He likes her.
And Emma
he likes Emma.
And Emma does not realize it.
Yeah. And so it's just like watching a crash in slow motion over the course of about 40 pages. And I'm just like, this is going to be a disaster.
So Mr. Elton proposes to Emma in the carriage. And Emma like pretty flatly turns him down hard. Yeah. And it was like, no, you're in love with Harriet. And he's like, what? No. And then the carriage ride goes on for like 4 minutes of abject silence. And it's wonderful. And then Mr. Elton gets out and promptly leaves the village on like a sabbatical.
He's like, I'm gone.
I got to go. All right. Emma goes to Harriet and has to break the news. The boy who I thought was in love with you is in love with me. Oh, sorry, Harriet. And Harriet has now turned on Mr. Martin. And Harriet is just beside herself because she was in love with Mr. Elton, or at least in the idea. The book says that Harriet is the type of girl that when she falls in love, she will never fall out of love. Once she's loved, she's just going to have to love somebody. So Harriet's like sort of weepy and brokenhearted for like most of the book. And then so Harriet.
But she's one where like if you direct that love to a new place,
Oh, yeah,
it should be
it'll
all right.
catch fire.
You just got to guide it somewhere.
So Harriet is in a rough spot, and Mr. Knightley is kind of ticked at Emma because he did all this, and Emma's like, whatever, it was an honest mistake, whatever. Harry will just have to find somebody else. All right. Meanwhile, rumors have it that this young man is coming to... Emma has said that she's never going to marry. She says this a lot. She can't leave her father. Never going to... She doesn't want to marry.
She doesn't feel compelled to.
She doesn't feel compelled. She's wealthy. She's educated. She has purpose and meaning and friends. She doesn't really feel compelled to marry. But if she was going to marry, she would marry a man like Frank Churchill. And so there's this guy named Frank Churchill, and he is Mr. Weston, the guy that married Emma's governess, is his son. But doesn't have his Mr. Weston's name because he was basically brought up by Mr. Weston's first wife's family, who are like super rich, like weird rich. You know, when you're so rich, you're weird? It was like that kind of family, the Churchills. Anyway.
Yeah, so rich you can't like interact with other people normally.
That's right.
Because you could literally buy everything they own.
So like Knightley is wealthy, but he is a good patron to all of his farmers. And Emma is wealthy, but she lives in this small little village. But the Churchills like live in like space stations. You know, like they don't live with human beings.
Right.
So they're so rich, they're off on their crazy estates. And Frank Churchill was raised by this family that Mr. Weston had married into, then his wife died. And because Mr. Weston was lower born, the Churchills want nothing to do with Mr. Weston, but we'll take your grandchild. We'll take our grandchild. Thank you very much. And they raise Frank, and Frank is supported to be like charming and funny and affable and a bit of a dandy. And he's like 23, and he is foppish and funny. And he blows into town because his father has gotten married, although he didn't come quickly enough, according to Mr. Knightley. Mr. Knightley's like, your dad just got married and you haven't come to town to meet your new mother-in-law. That's like not cool. And Emma's like, but he's busy and he's rich and cool. He can't, you can't.
Got stuff to do.
You got stuff to do. He's got like dandy rich boy things.
And he also has a mom who is reportedly a shrew.
An aunt.
Is it
Or his grandmother, the Mrs. Churchill.
Yeah, so the elderess, the matron Churchill is a horror, apparently.
Yes. And keeps Frank essentially under lock and key.
Yeah.
All right. So Frank blows into town, and he is all sunshine and good and like jokes, and rubs Mr. Knightley the wrong way, and flirts with Emma. Is just a big flirt with Emma, and Emma, of course, loves being flirted with, and she is convinced that Frank is kind of falling for her, and she's never going to marry Frank Churchill. But if she was going to marry somebody, she would marry somebody like Frank Churchill. There's other people that are important in the story. Emma frequents the house of a woman who has sort of an unfortunate life named Miss Bates. And AJ, how would you describe Miss Bates?
Ooh, she's a chatter. She'll tell you a whole lot of things you didn't really want to know. Like she will talk for 3 pages about apples.
That's right. I gave my students an essay on Emma, and they have to write 2,000 words, which is a pretty beefy essay. Yep. And someone said, I'm just going to write my essay on Miss Bates and quote her at length.
The entire time.
Yeah, she will like walk into the house already talking. You know what I mean?
Exactly. And she
like,
just goes,
and then I said if he was going to take his pie, he would better leave it outside because pie cooled outside is better than pie cooled inside. And he gave me all his apples, which I thought was very nice. It was very nice of him to give us all his apples. It wasn't just some of his apples; it was all of his apples. What is he going to do for pies in the spring? Like
that's tough.
Just like that for pages and
like
pages
and pages and pages.
And
it's
everybody
exhausting.
has to suffer her, but she is very thankful for all the attention she gets, and she is of the situation where she has no money. And she has an elderly mother.
Didn't she used to have money? Isn't that the deal?
So it kind of worked like this. She grew up in sort of a more noble family. She never got married and has kind of been living off her dowry. Her mother is elderly and lives with them. And Miss Bates had a sister who married a military man named Fairfax. And they had a daughter named Jane. And the military Fairfax family, he died saving somebody. Like died in battle saving a general. And then Mama Fairfax died of a broken heart, left Jane, baby Jane, basically fatherless and motherless. And the general, out of sort of thankfulness, decided to raise Jane Fairfax in his house.
Okay.
And so then Jane Fairfax is now back in town, and she is pretty much Emma's age, and she is purported to be the most accomplished and beautiful young woman in England, at least according to Knightley. Knightley says that she is so charming and sophisticated. She plays piano like a concert pianist. She is very beautiful. She's very...
she's demure.
She's very demure. She's very reserved, very elegant. And whereas Emma is a little bit gregarious and is in people's business, Jane will never get in anybody's business. Emma can kind of play the piano, but hasn't really dedicated herself to play.
She can play, but she doesn't practice.
She doesn't practice, so she can play like, little fun country dance songs and like maybe some like classical music. But Jane will make you weep by playing the piano. And Jane comes back to town because the family that she's with is sort of like Jane's growing up and life's moving on, and she's not going to be able to stay with the family very long. And, she's been educated, and now it's like, all right, Jane, like we raised you, go find out your life. And the only thing Jane has open to her is maybe going and being a governess for a rich family. And for Jane, this is miserable. In fact, Jane at one point in the books she says she doesn't know what's worse, the transatlantic slave trade or being a governess, which is very funny. Maybe it's not funny, but Jane is not happy about this future.
Yeah.
She's back in town, and Emma is kind of jealous of Jane, and she's pretty sure that Jane is back, and that there's clearly a dark cloud hanging over Jane, and she thinks that Jane has had some kind of illicit love affair with somebody back where she grew up. And she sort of pieces it together. She's pretty sure that Jane had fallen in love with a man named Mr. Dixon, and Mr. Dixon is now marrying the daughter of the general. So Jane grew up with this girl.
Yeah.
And Emma's convinced that she and Mr. Dixon had this like secret smoochy love affair, but then Mr. Dixon is now marrying basically the girl Jane grew up with, and Jane is coming here to cry. And Emma's
She's getting out of Dodge to sort of get over the
that's right.
terrible.
And Jane's like, well, isn't that delicious? Perfect Miss Fairfax has this like scandalous past. A bunch of things happen in the book that sort of lead Emma to believe this is true. A mysterious piano shows up at her house. A very like ostentatious...
Not Emma's house, at Jane's house.
At Jane's house. This is like very fancy piano that should not be in poor Miss Bates's like hallway. And
like it costs as much as the house.
it costs as much as the house, and it's like you can't really fit there. And Jane is obviously embarrassed, and Mr. Knightley thinks that that's very... Mr. Knightley's like, why? Whoever gave that present is a fool, because it's nice because Jane loves the piano, but it's like, it's a burden. You've just given them a present that's a burden. That's not very thoughtful.
Yeah.
And Emma's like, oh.
Especially because she's sort of just visiting, right?
Yeah. Yeah, she's not even here for a long time. She's just visiting until she gets a job.
Yeah.
And Jane's like, oh, a fancy piano, huh? And so she's pretty convinced that Mr. Dixon sent it. Anyway, long story short, Mr. Elton comes back into town with a wife, and Miss Augusta Elton.
Wow.
And Augusta Elton comes in, and she's definitely new money, and she is also meddling, and she is in people's business. And the more you read it, the more you realize that Mrs. Elton is like the potential future Emma if Emma kind of becomes more unbearable. Or if Emma didn't have like the good graces to soften her meddling, like Emma's clever and coy enough to be able to make her meddling, charming and amusing. Mrs. Elton does not have these gifts.
Yeah, she calls people by their first name, which people don't like.
Yeah.
Everyone's like, how can she so presume? Or Jane?
She calls Mr. Knightley Knightley.
Yeah.
Or Mr. K, which is very funny.
And so that's really funny. And pretty quickly I realized that So Augusta she sort of adopts Jane as like her project, which is exactly what Emma had done with Harriet. And you're like, and then the funny thing is Emma hates this woman.
Yes, Emma does not like this woman,
and complains about all the things she's doing while Emma sort of does the same thing.
And Emma's like, why would Jane? Like Jane really is this really stand-up person. Why would Jane like stand being with Mrs. Elton? And Knightley points out, well, it's either that or Miss Bates, right? And Miss Bates chats all the time, so maybe Jane just wants a chance to go off and
Because like you don't hang out with her.
and Mrs. Elton is trying to like figure stuff out for Jane. And you know what, Emma? You don't hang out with Jane, even though you're the same age and you guys should be friends. And everyone sort of assumes you should be friends because you grew up in the same village and you're the same age. And you just don't want to hang out with her. And Emma's like, oh, that's true. And Emma feels kind of bad. Did you guys ever
Because
have...
Emma was a little bit like jealous, right?
Emma's super jealous of Jane.
Yeah.
Right? Now, did you guys ever have that experience where, like, your parents really wanted you to be friends with somebody, like at your school or in your neighborhood, and you really didn't want to be friends with that person?
Yeah.
It was like, yeah, they're friends with the parents, and it just doesn't work between the kids. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, definitely.
And this is what everyone thinks Jane and Emma should be.
Yeah. I think my experience was my parents had to like get rid of a few of my friends because they were bad
Oh,
influences.
there you go. That's fun. Like,
but
like down a well.
Yeah. Whoops.
Last episode. Good. Yep.
So anyway, Mr. Knightley's like, well, you know, you could be nicer to Jane and maybe be her friend. And Emma really tries to be nicer to Jane, but she just can't do it. And Jane really is not like into it.
Because Jane's pretty quiet and still
Jane's
reserved.
pretty quiet and reserved. And they're also like, Jane seems to have it out for Emma just a little bit. There's something about Emma. And Emma just assumes it's because she's rich and because she's got things going for her. And, you know, so Emma realizes that Jane kind of like, you know, is kind of snappy at her. And Emma's like, what did I do to you? You know, Emma's not into it.
Right.
I'm trying to think how much detail to give into this. As the book goes on, someone makes the reference that she thinks that Mrs. Weston thinks that maybe maybe Mr. Knightley is in love with Jane. And Emma's like, oh gosh, I've never thought about that. And she sort of observes and watches, and she's like, oh my goodness, maybe he is. And later on, she confronts Knightley about it, and Knightley's like, although I think Jane is a wonderful woman, she is a little too shy, a little too reserved for me. But I don't like her that way. And Emma's like,
he says he prefers like an open disposition.
That's
right.
right. And he's like, and so Emma's like, see, Mrs. Weston, leave the matchmaking to people who know what they're doing. Clearly, you don't have an eye for this kind of thing. Well, the whole like Mr. Elton and Harriet thing, but that was like, you know, that was just one little minor
As an outlier.
Yeah.
Yeah.
As the book goes on, Frank is more and more flirty with Emma to the point where Emma's worried that one day Frank's going to propose to her and she's going to have to turn him down.
Because there was a time when she was kind of into it.
She was into it, but she was like, she just really liked being flirted with.
Yeah.
As we all do.
And she never really fell in love with him.
But she never really fell in love with him. And then Frank had to go away, and he came to Emma and was like, so you probably suspected by now. And Emma's like, oh crap, here it is. And then he stops. And then he kind of like laughs it off. And then someone comes in the room, and then he's like, well, bye. And he leaves. And Emma's like, whew, okay. At least I didn't have to like reject this poor man.
Yeah.
Frank goes off. You know, time goes on. We missed, and then eventually, Jane is found. Mrs. Elton finds a position for Jane at a governess of someone's house that sounds just crappy. Like it's not going to be fun. It's like living with Mrs. Elton's best friend, teaching their little like monsters. So Jane is not happy about this, and is like sort of sick and wasting away. Frank comes back for the spring, and everyone's so happy to see Frank again that they decide what they're going to do is they are going to have this. They're going to go on this big, like, fun outing. They're going to go on this hiking trip to a place called Box Hill. And Frank is back, and Jane is, like, just wasting away because of her future. The Eltons are super happy because they've, like, done such a good thing for poor Miss Fairfax. Miss Bates, Knightley, Jane, the Eltons, Emma, and Frank all go on this trip. Oh, and Harriet all go on this trip.
This is the whole crew. The
whole
whole
crew
bunch.
goes up on this mountain.
Even Mr. Woodhouse goes, and they sort of convince him that it's good for him and then put him in a little abbey.
They
right?
put him in a little carriage and a little, they sort of like put umbrellas over him
They
and
put him in a room and put some stuff over his head, and then they're like,
they feed him sandwiches and he's fine.
yeah.
Sounds great.
So they all go to this hill, and the whole time it was like two groups had decided they wanted to do this, and when they both found out they decided to merge the groups. But then sort of partway through the trip, they realized we're not really like this is. We all had different ideas of what this day was, and no one's really getting along, and no one's really leading this thing. And the whole time, Frank is just openly flirting with Emma. and Emma is openly flirting back with Frank. And everyone's just sort of sitting there watching this flirt game happen, and they're not into it. And Frank's like, man, this party sucks. Let's play a game. Let's play a flatter Emma game. And everyone's like, I don't want to play that game.
Bad.
And then Frank's like, okay, well, let's play a guess what we're thinking game. And Knightley says, do you really want to guess what I'm thinking, Frank? And Frank's like, oh, yeah, maybe let's not do that. And then he's like, well, let's play a game. You have to say something clever, 2 things kind of clever, or 3 not clever things.
Okay.
And Mrs. Bates says, oh, thank goodness. We all know that I couldn't have said anything clever, but I can say 3 unclever things, quickly. And Emma says, now, Miss Bates, you have to keep it to only 3.
Oh.
And
like she's like, I'm not worried that you could say,
Say 3 things.
I'm worried that like you won't be able to stop
Whoa.
at just
Yes.
3.
Hey, what the heck?
And
It's
then
it is like a.
it is, and we should probably read the scene, but I don't want to find it. Here, but
Pass me the book. I'll do the work.
no, I know where it is. Let's find it. So
messed up.
it is.
That's terrible.
Oh,
it is
yeah, it's a low blow.
It is a low blow. So let's see if I can find it.
And haven't you said Emma's like a higher station than
Yes,
than she is?
she's
So,
a higher
So-
station than Miss
okay,
Bates.
I'll read the
That's
thing.
terrible.
So here's Frank standing up. Here are 7 of you besides myself, who, she is pleased to say, am very entertained already. And she only demands, he's saying that Emma demands this of you. She only demands from each of you either 1 thing very clever, be it prose or verse, original or repeated, or 2 things moderately clever, or 3 things very dull indeed. And she engages to laugh heartily at them all. Oh, very well, exclaimed Miss Bates, then I need not be uneasy. 3 things very dull indeed. That will do just for me, I shall be sure to say 3 dull things as soon as ever I open my mouth, shan't I? Ha, ha, ha. She looks around with the most good-humored dependence on everyone's assent.
So she's already like poking fun at herself, right?
So she knows she's a little, do you not all think I shall? Emma could not resist. Ma'am, but there may be a difficulty. Pardon me, but you will be limited as to number. Only 3 at once. Miss Bates, deceived by the mock ceremony of her manner, did not immediately catch her meaning. But when it burst on her, it could not anger, though a slight blush showed that it could pain her. To be sure, yes, I see what she means, turning to Mr. Knightley, and I will try to hold my tongue. I must make myself very disagreeable, or she would not have said such a thing to an old friend.
And the worst thing is like, don't they after this they kind of go on a walk, and the whole time Miss Bates is like justifying Emma and saying like she must be having a bad day or she has a headache or like she just says only
No,
nice
she says
things.
Emma must be the greatest of all creatures if she comes and visits me so frequently, even though I annoy her so much, says Miss Bates.
It's just so like.
And so this is
hurts.
going on, and then at this point, people are like, we're out of here.
Yeah.
And they get up and they go for a walk. And then Frank and Jane have this weird exchange where Frank says something and Jane just absolutely backhanded cuts him with something that she said to him. And Frank's like, ha, 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 ha. And Jane Fairfax is not happy about this whole situation.
Does Emma realize she messed up?
Emma feels kind of, but she doesn't at this point. But then Mr. Knightley comes up to Emma. And remember, they're old family friends.
Yeah, she's known him pretty much her whole life.
He says, Emma. So Knightley comes up and says, Emma, I must once more speak to you as I've been used to. A privilege rather endured than allowed, perhaps, but I must still use it. I cannot see you acting wrong without a remonstrance. How could you be so unfeeling to Miss Bates? How could you be so insolent in your wit to a woman of her character, age, and situation? Emma, I had not thought it possible. Emma recollected, blushed, but was sorry, but tried to laugh it off. Nay, how could I help saying what I did? Nobody could have helped it. It was not so very bad. I dare say she did not even understand me. I assure you she did. She felt your full meaning. She has talked of it since. I wish you could have heard how she talked of it, with such candor and generosity. I wish you could have heard her honoring your forbearance and being able to pay her such attentions as she was forever receiving from yourself and your father when her society must be so irksome. Oh, cried Emma, I know there is not a better creature in the world, but you must allow that what is good and what is ridiculous are most unfortunately blended in her. They are blended, said he, I acknowledge. And were she prosperous, I could allow much for the occasional prevalence of the ridiculous over the good. Were she a woman of fortune, I could leave every harmless absurdity to take its chance. I would not quarrel with you for any liberties of manner. Were she your equal in situation, but Emma, consider how far this is from being the case. She is poor. She has sunk from the comforts she has been born to, and if she lives to an old age, must probably sink more. Her situation should secure your compassion. It was badly done indeed. Yeah. You, whom she has known from an infant, whom she has seen grow up from a period when her notice was an honor, to have you now in thoughtless spirits and the pride of the moment laugh at her, humble her, and before her niece too, and before others, many of whom, certainly some, would be entirely guided by your treatment of her, that is not pleasant to you, Emma. Probably talking about Frank, who would probably take up the game, and maybe even Harriet, who always just sort of like does what Emma does.
Sure.
Yep.
That is not pleasant to you, Emma, and it is far from pleasant to me, but I will tell you truths while I can, satisfied with proving myself your friend by very faithful counsel, and trusting that you will sometime or other do me greater justice than you do now. So he kind of gives Emma a bit of a dressing down.
Yep.
Emma takes it, feels terrible, goes to the carriage with Harriet in the carriage ride home, and Emma just cries her eyes out in the carriage. And Harriet's like, what do I do? What do I do? Yeah. Well, she's in the carriage while Emma is just bawling her eyes out.
And rightly so.
And rightly so.
Does Emma make it right?
Emma does.
Okay.
Emma goes to Miss Bates's house, and she somewhat apologizes. She doesn't say what I've done was really terrible. But just by going to the house and sitting for tea and being very kind and being there, it's clear that Emma has sort of apologized and has felt bad on this, even though Jane Fairfax is like not cool with Jane, or not cool with Emma.
Because of this.
Just the whole thing. Yes, because of this. And
is this a period when Jane tries to visit, or when Emma tries to visit, and Jane just shuts her out?
Emma tries to visit Jane, and Jane is like, "Oh, she's indisposed. She's not seeing anybody. She's not feeling well." But then it turns out she's meeting other people, and she's going for walks in the hills. Yeah. And Emma is, does not. She's like, "What did I do to make Jane so mad?" All right. A couple of other things happen. There's this weird scene where Harriet gets attacked by gypsies, and she's rescued by Frank.
Okay.
And
not by Frank, by Knightley.
By Frank Churchill, because Emma's like, "Ooh, you're gonna fall in love now."
I thought it was Knightley
that
did
Frank
this.
Churchill. So Frank Churchill saves Harriet from gypsies, and later on, Harriet says, "Emma, I'm in love again," and Emma's like, "Don't tell me. I know who it is. It's and Emma thinks it's Frank. Trust me."
Are you sure? I'm so dubious.
Yeah, it's fine. You both be dubious. And so Harriet is rescued by Frank Churchill, and Emma thinks that would be the greatest beginning to a love story ever. And Frank is foppish and rich, and Harriet is beautiful. What could?
You're right. It was Mr. Knightley that saved Harriet at the dance.
Correct. Yeah. Yes. Mr. Knightley had been very kind to Harriet by dancing with her when Mr. Elton, who is now married, refused to dance with her. And so there's this whole thing there. Anyway,
that's right.
Harriet says she's in love again, but she doesn't want to say who. And Emma's like, "You don't need to tell me, girl." And Emma's pretty sure it's Frank Churchill. Mm-hmm. Okay. Then we find out. Then old lady Churchill dies, and Frank is gone, and he comes back.
The shrew, the old shrew,
and Jane is about to go off on her being a teacher. Frank comes back. Turns out Frank and Jane have been secretly engaged this whole time.
Wow. There's a twist.
Yeah,
wow.
There's a huge twist.
Man.
And foppish young Frank Churchill and demure, beautiful, sophisticated Jane Fairfax have been secretly engaged. And Frank's
literally the entire time he's been in town.
Wow, that's
he's
crazy.
been flirting with Emma to throw people off the scent, and plus he kind of just likes the fact that he and Jane have this secret that no one knows.
Yeah.
And by flirting with Emma, he's kind of like looking at Jane and being like, and Jane does not like this.
Sure.
She thinks that it's really mean.
Yeah.
And but of course Emma's flirting back, which is why Jane's not cool with Emma.
Right.
And Emma is like absolutely scandalized. She's like, "You think you know somebody?"
And the piano, by the way,
was
from Frank the whole time.
Wow. That's right.
And he even talked with Emma about who could possibly have done this, you know, and they're cooking up all these theories about some other love affair when the entire time it was him.
And Frank's like, "Oh, tell me more." And she's like, "I think it's Mr. Dixon." And he's like, "Delightful."
He just loves it.
Yes,
yeah.
he loves
That's
it.
really good.
Yeah.
Because so then Emma finds this about Frank, and she's like, "How can somebody be so cruel?" Emma thought that she and Frank were part of this inside joke about Jane, and it turns out that Emma's the joke.
Yeah.
And she feels betrayed and disgusted, and she's just like, "I thought Frank was a man," and she's upset with him. But then she sort of realizes that like she doesn't really, she has a harder, she can't read people like she thought she could.
Yeah.
Oh crap, poor Harriet, she's in love with Frank. Yeah. So she goes to Harriet and she's like, girl, I got some bad news. The boy you're in love with is marrying Jane. And she's like, oh, Knightley's marrying Jane? And Harry's like, no, Frank's marrying Jane. And she's like, oh, I'm in love with Mr. Knightley. He saved me at the dance and he's so dreamy. And you did encourage me, Emma. You did say that even though I was poor, that someone of higher class could love me, and I love him, and I think I deserve it. And she's like, Harriet starts...
And wasn't there a time when she said, like, when Emma assumed that she loved Frank, that Emma sort of like nudge encouraged
Yeah, she's
it?
like, go for it, girl. That could totally happen. And Harriet's like, with your encouragement, I'm going to go for it. And something in Emma changes. And hearing Harriet, she's like, so all of a sudden, all of these various crises, Box Hill, Frank is actually with Jane, Harriet is in love with Knightley, not Frank. Emma realizes that she doesn't have the gift of being able to read people.
Right, yes.
She's not as good at it as she thought she was.
She's not as good at this. And when she hears that Harriet, and then she sort of starts going back in her mind, she's like, holy crap. Knightley danced with Harriet at the dance. Knightley has been walking with Harriet a lot on our walks together. And in fact, Knightley had said to Emma, he's like, you know what, Emma? I used to think Harriet was an airhead, but she's actually kind of a cool girl. And she's not as dumb as I thought she was.
And he prefers an open disposition.
And I do prefer an open disposition to Jane. Yeah. And Emma realizes, oh my word, Harriet, Knightley, he's just the kind of guy that won't care what people think if he goes and marries a poor girl. And then Emma realizes the thought of not having Mr. Knightley in her life just breaks her heart. And then she realizes that she's in love with Mr. Knightley.
And has been the whole time. And she's
has
like,
been the whole time.
It's just like
this is great.
Oh no.
Man.
Like
So,
I'm desperately in love. Like,
This is so good.
So she was extremely angry with herself. If she could have been angry with Frank Churchill too, it would have been dreadful. As for Jane Fairfax, she might have at least relieved her feelings from any present solicitude on her account. Harriet would be anxiety enough. She need no longer be unhappy about Jane, whose troubles and whose ill health having, of course, the same origin, must be equally under cure. Her days of insignificance and evil were over. Jane, would soon be well and happy and prosperous. Emma could now imagine why her own attentions had been slighted. The discovery laid many smaller matters open. And this is sort of the and so then she finds out. So she finds out that Harriet is in love with Knightley, and she freaks out. And then she hears this. As soon as Harriet tells her, it says, Emma's eyes were instantly withdrawn, and she sat silently meditating in a fixed attitude for a few minutes. A few minutes were sufficient for making her acquainted with her own heart. A mind like hers, once open to suspicion, made rapid progress. She touched, she admitted, she acknowledged the whole truth. Why was it so much worse that Harriet should be in love with Mr. Knightley than with Frank Churchill? Why was the evil so dreadfully increased by Harriet's having some hope of a return? It darted through her with the speed of an arrow that Mr. Knightley must marry no one but herself. Her own conduct, as well as her own heart, was before her in the same few minutes. She saw it all with a clearness which had never blessed her before. We'll sort of briefly finish the story, but it's that line that I kind of want to talk about for the rest of our time. The story finishes where Mr. Knightley comes to Emma's house, and Mr. Knightley is really nervous to talk to Emma because Knightley is like, I need to tell you something. Frank Churchill is marrying Jane. And Emma's like, I know. Yeah. And I'm cool with it. And he's like, you're cool with it? I thought you were in love with Frank. She's like, nah, I just like being flirted with. And then Knightley's like, okay, this is good. This is okay. So you're not in love with Frank. And then it turns out that they mention the whole thing about Harriet, and they find out who Harriet's family was. It was no one fancy.
Right.
And Mr. Knightley is not going to marry Harriet because it turns out Mr. Knightley has always been in love with Emma the whole time.
But I love how it goes because they're like walking, and he goes, okay, so now that we've solved the Frank thing, I have something I need to talk to you about. And she's like, yeah. And she's fully convinced that he loves Harriet.
Right.
And so she is like, okay, I think I know what you're going to say, and please don't. Like, let's just not talk about it. let's go in and like, I just like, you can keep it to yourself. I'd rather not do it. And she just like full on shuts him down.
Another moment where Emma thinks that she knows what's going on
Right.
and almost ruins it by like, by leaning into the narrative she has in her mind.
Yeah, he very obviously wants to tell her that he's in love with her, but she thinks he's gonna say like, I'd love to
Your dopey
marry
best friend.
Yeah, your dopey best friend. And she's like, okay, let's just not do it. Like, let's go inside. Good day to you, good day. And then she like walks in, and then she comes out like 2 minutes later, convinced that she has been sort of like cruel again. She's like, and I must like suffer the heaviness of being told that he loves somebody else. And she's like, I'm sorry, I cut you off. You can tell me what you need to tell me. Like, I'm ready for it.
Yeah.
And he's like, you sure? She's like, because a second ago, and she's like, yeah. And he's like, okay, you just got to tell me there's a chance. Like, I know you're into other people. Like, I just want to know that there's like a version somewhere down the line where like you love me. And she's like, moi. And like, it's adorable.
So
right?
the complete inversion of the Mr. Elton scene, right?
Yeah.
And so then she and Mr. Knightley are in love, but there's a huge problem. Two problems, Harriet and Mr. Woodhouse. To make a long story short, those problems were solved with Mr. Martin comes out of the woodwork again and decides he's going to take a second shot at proposing to Harriet.
Yep.
And this time,
Harriet has been away for a little while. Like
Harriet got a bad
again.
tooth and she had to go to London to get it fixed.
Yeah, so she hangs out with Mr. Martin a lot. They go to dinner, and then like right after the dinner, he's like, marriage time again. Let's make this happen.
And Harriet's no longer by Emma, and Harriet's like, I can make my own decisions.
Great.
And then she marries
Says
Mr.
yes,
Martin.
Good, great.
And like for real,
Good for them.
Like Mr.
Yeah.
Martin is maybe the
so
only
good.
character I actually like.
Oh, I love Knightley. Knightley's the best. We can talk about it in the in-between. All right.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then Mr. Woodhouse, of course, Emma's like, we can't leave my dad. He's not going to move to your house, Knightley. I can't marry until he's dead. And Knightley's like, listen, I will leave my big fancy mansion. I'll sort of mothball my mansion, have the servants like do all the dusting and whatever. And I'll just come live in your girl house with your dad.
Yeah.
And so Mr. Knightley is going to move into a house that's very much just been run by a single girl. It's probably like pink throw cushions and only one bathroom with makeup everywhere and like, and Mr. Knightley's like, I'll do that. I don't care. I love you and I love your father. And then they get married and they live happily ever
is
after.
so good.
It is so good.
Yeah, I love
now, the thing that I wanted to point out, and this is the
The funny thing is them trying to convince Mr. Woodhouse that marriage is a good idea.
do you want? So the reason why he gets convinced is there is a rash of turkey thefts, and so somebody through the village had like broken into coops and stolen turkeys, and Mr. Woodhouse is like, "We're next." And then he's like, it would be good to have a man around all the time. And so Mr.
He's like,
Knightley,
we've got to stay safe.
we've got to stay
Gotta have
safe.
Knightley
You
in the
can
house.
marry Knightley.
It's great.
In fact, you should marry him soon and bring him into the house to save us from the turkey thief, which is glorious.
That's great.
Anyway,
great.
so the line between the tragedy that Emma thinks she's going to have is Jane and Frank are gone and married. Knightley and Harriet are married, and she can't really hang out with Knightley the way that she could. And she was going to be alone with her father, and when her father died, she would be a lonely spinster. And Emma, who prided herself on being able to like figure out the narrative before everybody else and manipulate the game, was actually going to lose the game and was going to be sad the rest of her life. That was a tragedy that was going to befall Emma. But Emma learns Emma's own self is revealed to herself before it's too late. And she's revealed by a bunch of crises. The crisis on Box Hill, where Knightley dresses her down. The crisis of obviously Mr. Elton and Harriet at the beginning of the book. The crisis of Jane and Frank, and Emma feeling like she was on the butt end of the joke. And then being really mean, or realizing that she has been really mean to Jane when she didn't really mean to be. She just was. Of course Jane didn't like her. Being on the wrong narrative about who Harriet was in love with and putting her foot in her mouth about that kind of thing. All these crises, she sort of learns who she is, and she's able to, and she's been able to course correct before it happens. But one of the sort of the glorious things about the book is that Emma doesn't go and make everything right. Right? She doesn't be like, Knightley, it's you I love. And she's like, Harry, let's go get you married to Mr. Martin. And like, Emma doesn't go and like clean up her own mess. But when she realizes the thing about herself, it's actually the fact that Knightley has already loved her. And the fact that even though Emma has had these sins, we'll call them, has had these character flaws that could have swamped her little boat, she's also had these graces, and she's also had these like positive characteristics, and everyone kind of loves her for it. Like Miss Bates is welcome and ready to forgive Emma for that being mean, because Emma's also very fun to be around and entertains her and comes to her house and brings her things and has tea, and it's really fun to have when Miss Woodhouse comes around. And Knightley is, of course, quick to forgive her because she is gregarious and lively, and she really is well-meaning, and she does love people. Even though she was on the path to being a Mrs. Elton, she sort of learns before then and turns away from that path. And so Mr. Knightley is just so thankful that like Emma has matured in this way and that his love is not being misplaced. So Emma, in fact, really, it does kind of have this like charmed ending. She doesn't go and solve all of her problems, but
A lot of them are solved just by luck.
a lot of them are, well, no, not just by luck, but I want to posit that they're solved by like the love people have for her positive characteristics are going to be the things that allow people to like quickly want to forgive her. And
Well, I meant like Harriet falling for a different guy.
well, yeah, Harriet following
Yeah.
and Mr. Martin coming back. Maybe, and there is maybe some sort of subtext that Mr. Knightley has always kept the door open for Mr. Martin and Harriet and Knightley, because Harriet goes to spend time with the Knightley family, like Mr. Knightley's brother, and then Mr. Martin like goes to London and is like, "Oh, Harriet, fancy meeting you here. What's a farmer doing in London?" So that may have been like a Knightley thing.
Yeah.
But Emma has to have herself revealed to herself, and that's the line between tragedy and comedy, right? You learn who you actually are, and in a tragedy, you have no time to change it, and in a comedy, you have time to change it. Or in the case of Emma, the love that other people have for you changes it, right? Like you're not going to be swept off in your negative characteristics. You're going to be sort of brought into the glory of your positive characteristics. And Emma needs to, but the only way that's going to happen is if Emma really learns the lessons about herself. She is in people's lives. She's a little nosy. The line between like the narrative she tells and reality, like that gap is huge. Like Emma does not, she can't put the pieces together. Mr. Knightley can. He's actually, Mr. Knightley clues in on Jane and Frank early in the book. He's like, I think there's something going on there. And I was like, no, Knightley, that's dumb. And Knightley's right.
Yeah.
And so there's this like, that you need, everybody needs to learn who they are sooner or later, and you want to learn who you are sooner rather than later, so that you can, fix the problems before they're unfixable, before Emma's by herself,
Right.
and all her loves have gone to love somebody else. And the only thing that can reveal that is people who love you, who are willing to tell you when you're wrong, and also you kind of going through crises. You going through, Box Hill and Box Hill and the Jane Frank thing is not like a crisis, but it is. It is a personal crisis where you all of a sudden realize that there's some ugliness to you.
And it's a social one, too. If she wouldn't have made that right, people would have been grumpy.
Yeah.
She could have lost some friends.
Yeah.
And so, although Emma, she does not end up becoming this like, she's still gregarious and she's still in people's business and she's still the life of the party and she's still a little bit vain and rich, but there is now a softening of her edges in that she's learned this. And the path that she could have been going down to becoming like a Mrs. Weston, or maybe, even though we never meet her as a character, an old battle axe Miss Churchill, or Mrs. Churchill, who's always got her claws in Frank and uses her status to really control people. These are the trajectories and the terminuses that Emma could have ended up in. But when she realizes who she actually is and feels bad about it and has a conscience, that's a big theme, a big topic in the book is developing conscience. Then she's able to course correct and is able to move into actually then having a lifetime of happiness. And like how I said at the beginning of this podcast, I really think Jane Austen books you can very profitably read them as what does a healthy psychological makeup look like? And these are not Hallmark characters. These are not like two-dimensional sort of little fantasy characters. These are real. Her characters are very realistic and human. And a lot of people sort of poo-poo Jane Austen because they always have these happy endings that end in marriage. But I really do think that if you read them saying to yourself, this is, the lessons that these characters are going to learn are the lessons that everybody needs to learn about themselves if they want to have like a settled spirit and a lifetime of community and real happiness. Then I think that's why I think the Austen novels end up being these really important books for people to read. Almost like how a doctor needs to know what a healthy body is like. I think a human person needs to have a vision of what like a healthy soul looks like. And I think the characters, the happy characters in Jane Austen really show that. So that's where, I mean, there's probably more to say. We're already at the hour mark. So we should probably end there. We can save some stuff for the in-between. I have been kicking around, and maybe we'll ask this out and throw this out to our listeners, Patreon and non-Patreon. I really have been kicking around wanting to do a longer form, like multi-houred, not maybe in this podcast, but maybe like writing it out and having sort of a multi-houred discussion about all of the Jane Austen novels with that kind of lens of comparing, of talking about sort of what it means to be healthy and happy. So if that's something that people are interested in, I would like to know if that's what people would like, and maybe I would sort of throw myself into that. But anyway, but that's Emma in a nutshell.
That was great. This has been Classical Stuff You Should Know. You can find us online at classicalstuff.net. You can email us at theguys@classicalstuff.net. You can find us on Patreon, which Graeme just referenced, where we record in-between episodes, in between each of our episodes. We also do monthly AMAs where our patrons can ask us questions, which we will then answer. And you can find us on Twitter or X at Classical Stuff, CLSSCAL stuff. And I think that's everything.
Awesome.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, guys.
Bye.
Bye.
Ciao.